I am Maya. I am 33 years old and the CEO of a billion-dollar lifestyle empire. Last night, my own mother snatched my brother's engagement party invitation out of my hands. She told me I was too embarrassing to be seen around his wealthy new-in-laws. My brother laughed and called me a peddler. What they did not know was that I had just bought out his fiancée's entire company. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to toxic family members who underestimated your worth. Growing up, I was the scapegoat while my brother Marcus was the golden child. Now let me take you to the Sunday dinner that ended our family as we knew it. The smell of roasted chicken usually meant comfort, but tonight the air in my mother Vivian's dining room was thick with tension. I had just reached for the cream envelope sitting next to my plate when my mother's hand slammed down on the heavy mahogany table. She physically snatched the paper right out of my grasp, her long acrylic nails dug fiercely into the gold foil lettering. I looked up in shock. My mother's face was tight with deep disapproval. Her jaw was set in that familiar rigid line she always used when she was about to cut me down. "You do not need to look at that," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You are not going to the engagement party tomorrow night." I slowly put my silver fork down on the porcelain plate. The dining room was completely silent except for the heavy ticking of the antique grandfather clock. I looked across the table at Marcus. My older brother was busy cutting his steak, not even bothering to look at me. He was wearing a designer silk shirt that I knew for a fact he had bought on a high-interest credit card. His fiancée Madison came from a so-called old money family, and Marcus had spent the last 6 months pretending he belonged naturally in their exclusive world. "Not going?" I asked, keeping my voice perfectly level. "It is a family event, Mom. We have been talking about this for weeks." Marcus finally looked up and let out a short, mocking laugh that echoed in the room. "Family event," he repeated, wiping his mouth casually with a crisp linen napkin. "Maya, it is a private country club event. Madison's parents are inviting their major corporate partners and elite local politicians. These are people who actually have real careers and prestige. People who did not drop out of a good college to sell cheap things on the internet." My mother nodded enthusiastically, backing him up just like she always did. "Marcus is exactly right, Maya. You have to understand how this looks to her people. Madison's family is very distinguished. They are high society. We have a specific image to uphold now. If you show up in your cheap clothes talking about your little peddling business, it will ruin the entire elegant aesthetic of the evening. We simply cannot risk you embarrassing Marcus in front of his new family. He has worked much too hard to secure this important relationship." The sheer audacity of her cruel words hung heavily in the air between us. A little peddling business. That was exactly what they called Aura Holdings. They honestly thought I was struggling to sell handmade soaps online because I kept my professional private life separate from their toxic drama. I never once corrected them because their arrogant assumptions kept them far away from my bank accounts. But hearing my own mother call me a total embarrassment to my face just to protect the fragile ego of her golden son was a brand new low even for her. I looked over at the stainless steel trash can sitting in the corner of the room. My mother had actually tossed the beautiful gold-embossed invitation right in with the greasy food scraps. It was a physical manifestation of exactly where I stood in this family dynamic. Discarded, unwanted, a permanent stain on their perfectly curated illusion of grand success. "You are banning me from your own engagement party to prevent a perceived embarrassment," I clarified, looking directly and intensely into Marcus's eyes. "Do not play the pathetic victim, Maya," Marcus snapped loudly, pointing his sharp steak knife directly at me. "You chose your own path in life. You threw away your expensive education. I am the one carrying the family name forward. I am the one marrying into an incredibly good family to elevate our social status. You should be happy for my success, instead of trying to selfishly insert yourself where you clearly do not belong. Just stay home tomorrow. It is much better for everyone involved." The old, younger version of Maya would have cried right then and there. The old Maya would have argued passionately and begged desperately for their basic acceptance and love. But I had spent the last 10 grueling years building a massive corporate empire from the ground up. I had ruthlessly negotiated with cutthroat developers and fired corrupt executives twice my age without blinking. I did not have any tears left for toxic people who only loved a fake, wealthy version of themselves. I stood up gracefully from the table. My posture was perfectly straight and commanding. I did not raise my voice at all. I did not show an ounce of anger or hurt. I completely understand, I said calmly. If my presence is a threat to your social standing, I will stay far away. I tossed a sleek white envelope onto the center of the table. Enjoy your evening without me. I turned around swiftly and walked out. The game was finally over, and the entire board belonged completely to me. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind me, sealing away the suffocating air of my childhood home. I walked down the brick pathway to my car. The cool evening breeze felt like true freedom. I slid into the driver's seat of my customized black Porsche Panamera. The leather interior was a quiet luxury, a stark contrast to the loud, desperate performance going on inside that dining room. I started the engine and the powerful purr of the motor vibrated through the steering wheel. I pulled out of the driveway, leaving the manicured lawn and the hollow expectations far behind me. The streetlights flickered overhead as I navigated the winding suburban roads toward the highway. I felt no regret. I only felt a deep, profound clarity. The envelope I left on the table would detonate soon enough, but right now I just wanted the quiet of the drive. My sanctuary was interrupted by the sharp ringing of the Bluetooth system routing through the car speakers. The dashboard illuminated with the caller ID. It was Marcus. For a brief second, I wondered if my mother had actually opened the envelope early. But no, that was not his style. If they had opened it, he would be calling in a state of absolute terror, not with this aggressive, demanding ringtone. I debated letting it go to voicemail like I always did, but a morbid curiosity took over. I pressed the accept button on the steering wheel. "Maya, listen to me," he barked immediately. There was no hello. There was no apology for the humiliating display at dinner. His voice was frantic and thick with entitled rage. "I need you to do something right now, and I do not want to hear any of your usual excuses." I kept my eyes on the road. "I am listening," I said, keeping my voice entirely devoid of emotion. "I need you to co-sign a loan for me," he demanded. His tone was not a request. It was an absolute directive from the golden child to the family disappointment. $50,000. I have the paperwork ready. I will email it to you tonight. You just need to e-sign it and send it back to the broker before tomorrow morning. Do not make a big deal out of it. I let out a soft, dry laugh. The sheer audacity of his demand was almost impressive. You ban me from your engagement party at dinner, and before I even make it to the highway, you are demanding I co-sign a loan for $50,000. Are you actually out of your mind, Marcus? Do not play games with me, Maya, he yelled. The Bluetooth speaker crackled slightly under the volume of his voice. You owe me this. You owe this entire family this. Do you have any idea how hard it has been for me? Do you have any concept of the pressure I have been under for the last 10 years? Here we go, I thought. The classic Marcus narrative. Ever since you decided to drop out of college and embarrass mom and dad, I have had to carry the entire weight of this family name, he screamed. I had to be the perfect son. I had to get the expensive degrees. I had to get the corporate job. I had to find a woman from a respectable high society family so people would not look at us like we were just some ghetto trash. You selfishly walked away to sell your little trinkets and left me to maintain the standard. Do you know how much it costs to keep up this lifestyle? Do you know what it takes to run in Madison circles? The dinners, the gifts, the country club fees. I am drowning, Maya. I gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. His words were a masterclass in manipulation. He was completely broke. He was living a massive lie financed by high-interest credit, and he was trying to blame his financial ruin on my decision to leave a university that made me miserable. So let me get this straight, I said, my voice dropping an octave into a cold, dangerous register. You are living way beyond your means to impress a woman who only loves the fake version of you. You are drowning in debt to keep up an image that mom demands. And somehow your absolute failure to manage your own finances is my fault because I refuse to be miserable with you. Shut up, he spat. You do not know anything about real success. You have no idea how the real world works. Just sign the damn paper, Maya. I am your older brother. You owe me for protecting you from mom all these years. If I go down the drain, this whole family loses its standing. Madison's family will pull the wedding. Do you want that on your conscience? Do you want to be the reason your own brother loses everything? I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator realizing the prey had just walked willingly into a trap. Marcus was so blinded by his own arrogance that he could not see the reality of his situation. He thought I was just his lowly dropout sister working a dead-end job. He had no idea he was demanding money from the CEO, who just orchestrated the hostile takeover of his fiancée's entire company. I do not owe you a single dime, Marcus, I said calmly. And I certainly do not care about Madison's family or their ridiculous country club standards. You wanted to be the golden boy. You wanted the burden of the family name. Well, congratulations, you have it all to yourself. Maya, if you do not sign this right now, I swear to God I will, he screamed. I disconnected the call, driving away fast. The highway stretched out before me, an endless ribbon of dark asphalt, illuminated only by the sharp beams of my headlights. The silence in the car lasted exactly 4 minutes before the dashboard screen lit up again. This time, it was not a phone call. It was a notification for a new voicemail. The caller ID boldly displayed my mother Vivian. I knew exactly what was happening. I reached out and tapped the play button on the console, letting the audio fill the quiet cabin of the Porsche. The recording started with the heavy sound of my mother breathing, followed immediately by the sharp rustle of heavy cardstock. She had not called to leave a standard message. She had called me in a fit of rage right as she was picking up the envelope I left on the dining room table. Her voice echoed sharply through the speakers, dripping with absolute disgust. Maya, you are an absolute disgrace walking out of Sunday dinner like that, she sneered into the phone. You think because you leave a little gift behind that it makes up for your terrible attitude. Let us see what you thought was an appropriate apology for trying to ruin your brother and his beautiful fiancée. I heard the distinct sound of paper tearing. My mother was ripping open the sleek white envelope, expecting to find a large check or a stack of crisp bills. That was how our family operated. Money was the only acceptable apology. But I had not left them a check. I had left them a massive reality check. There was a sudden dead silence on the recording. It lasted for several long seconds. Then my mother spoke again, and her voice was completely different. The anger was gone, replaced by a thin, wavering confusion. Marcus. What is this? She asked. Her voice sounded small and distant, as if she had pulled the phone away from her face to stare at the papers. What are these documents? I smiled, keeping my eyes fixed on the road. The papers she was holding were heavily detailed financial statements. As the CEO of Aura Holdings, I had access to a vast network of corporate data, including comprehensive background checks on anyone associated with the companies we acquired. When I initiated the hostile takeover of Madison and her public relations firm earlier that month, my financial team ran a standard audit on all upper management. Because Madison was legally tying herself to Marcus, my brother inevitably popped up in the financial crosshairs. What my team found was a spectacular disaster of defaulted credit lines and empty bank accounts. Give me that, Marcus snapped on the recording. I heard the aggressive snatching of paper. Then I heard the exact moment his fragile world shattered. He let out a sharp gasp that sounded like a man who had just been punched directly in the stomach. The papers detailed every single lie he had been living. The $25,000 charge on a high-interest credit card for the engagement ring Madison wore so proudly. The 3 months of missed payments on his luxury apartment. The maxed-out limits on 4 different personal loans. He was not a successful corporate executive building generational wealth. He was a sinking ship, drowning in a sea of toxic debt, all just to impress a woman who cared more about his perceived status than his actual soul. "Marcus, explain this right now," my mother demanded. Her voice was rising in panic. "It says here, you owe over $80,000. It says your car is in the process of being repossessed. Tell me this is some kind of sick joke." The desperation in his voice was pathetic. He immediately reverted to the only defense mechanism he knew, which was gaslighting our mother and turning the blame entirely on me. "Mom, do not look at that," he stammered, his voice pitching high with panic. "It is fake. It is all completely fake." "Maya forged these documents." "Forged them?" my mother asked, still sounding deeply uncertain. "Yes," he yelled loudly enough to distort the phone microphone. "Think about it, Mom. She is insanely jealous of me. She has always been jealous of me. She sits in her tiny apartment selling junk on the internet while I am out here succeeding and marrying into a prominent white family. She hates that I am elevating our family name. She went online and mocked up these fake bank statements just to scare you and ruin my engagement party. She is a psychotic, jealous loser, Mom." The silence returned briefly as my mother processed his frantic lies. I knew exactly how her mind worked, facing the terrifying reality that her golden son was a complete financial failure was simply too painful for her to accept. It was infinitely easier to believe that her scapegoat daughter was a jealous, malicious monster. The cognitive dissonance was too strong, and she chose the comfortable lie just like she always did. When she spoke again into the phone, her voice was completely devoid of any maternal warmth. It was pure, unadulterated venom. "Maya, if you are listening to this, you are dead to me," she snarled directly into the receiver. "I cannot believe you would stoop so low as to forge financial documents just to destroy your own brother. You are sick. You are a toxic disease in this family. You have always been a disappointment, but this is unforgivable. Do not ever contact us again. Do not come to the wedding. You are entirely cut off from this family until you get down on your knees and beg Marcus for forgiveness." The voicemail ended with a sharp click, leaving the car in total silence once again. I did not feel angry. I did not feel the familiar sting of rejection that used to paralyze me when I was younger. I felt absolutely nothing but a cold, calculating focus. They had chosen their path. They had chosen to believe the illusion over the reality. My mother had just officially disowned me over a pile of truthful documents because she preferred the comfort of my brother and his absolute lies. I reached out and tapped the screen, saving the voicemail to a secure cloud server. It was the perfect piece of evidence for the storm that was about to hit them. My mother thought she was cutting me off. She had no idea that I was the only thing standing between her and total financial ruin. I pressed my foot down on the accelerator, feeling the powerful engine roar to life as I sped through the dark night. Tomorrow was Monday. Tomorrow the corporate collision would begin. And tomorrow they would finally learn exactly who they had been calling a peddler. I pulled my Porsche into the private underground parking garage of the Obsidian Tower. The security guard at the booth gave me a respectful nod as the heavy steel gate slid open. I parked in my designated spot right next to the private elevator. I stepped out of the car and the cool air of the garage washed over me. I pressed my thumb against the biometric scanner next to the polished steel doors. The scanner beeped softly, flashing green. The elevator doors parted in absolute silence. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the penthouse floor. The ride up was smooth and fast. I watched the digital floor numbers climb rapidly. 50, 55, 60. When the doors opened again, I stepped directly into my home. My apartment was a sprawling, glass-enclosed sanctuary that occupied the entire top floor of the building. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the glittering downtown skyline. It was a long way from the cramped childhood bedroom my mother had painted a depressing shade of yellow. My phone buzzed in my hand again. It was another text message from Marcus. I did not even bother reading it. I simply swiped left and silenced the device, placing it face down on the massive marble kitchen island. I walked over to the built-in bar and poured myself a glass of cold, sparkling water. The ice clinked gently against the crystal glass. I took a slow sip, letting the cold liquid ground me. They truly believed I lived in a tiny, run-down apartment. They genuinely thought I was barely scraping by selling cheap trinkets. The reality was that Aura Holdings, the company I built from nothing, was a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate. We owned commercial real estate, luxury lifestyle brands, and boutique media agencies across the country. I was not a peddler. I was the apex predator in a corporate ecosystem they could not even begin to comprehend. I walked over to my desk, which sat facing the massive windows. I picked up my secure corporate phone. It was nearly 11 o'clock on a Sunday night, but my executive team was compensated exceptionally well to be available whenever I needed them. I scrolled through my encrypted contacts and tapped the name of my chief operating officer, David. The line rang exactly twice before he answered. "Good evening, Maya." David said, his voice sharp and fully alert. "Good evening, David," I replied, setting my glass down on the desk. "I need you to accelerate the timeline on the Vanguard Public Relations acquisition. I want the hostile takeover finalized and legally binding by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. "We have the capital ready and the controlling shares are already secured," David confirmed efficiently. "But accelerating the legal filings to tomorrow morning will trigger an immediate restructuring phase. Are you sure you want to move that aggressively?" "I am absolutely sure," I said, my voice dropping into a tone that left zero room for debate. "Push the paperwork through. I want the entire board of Vanguard notified before they even finish their morning coffee." "Consider it done," David said. "What about the current management structure at Vanguard? That is the second part of my directive." I continued, turning my chair to face the glittering city lights. "I want an immediate and total freeze on all corporate accounts for their middle management tier. Nobody spends a single dime of company money starting right now. I also want a forensic audit initiated immediately. Pull every expense report, every corporate credit card statement, and every client entertainment receipt from the past 12 months. I want a microscope on their marketing and public relations division." David typed rapidly on his keyboard. The sound was a sharp staccato through the phone. "Understood, Maya. Is there a specific target you are looking for in the marketing division?" "Yes," I said, my voice cold and entirely detached. "The Senior Director of Public Relations. Her name is Madison Avery. Pull everything you have on her. I want to see every cent she has expensed to that company. I want to know what she buys, where she eats, and who she entertains. I want her entire professional life itemized on my desk by noon tomorrow." "Consider her audited," David replied smoothly. "We will have a full forensic breakdown ready for your review." "Will you be heading to the Aura headquarters tomorrow morning or going directly to the new Vanguard offices?" "I will be at the Aura headquarters," I said. "Have the newly acquired Vanguard management team report to our main building for their introductory briefing. I want them to see exactly who owns them now." "Understood," David said. "Have a good night, Maya." I hung up the phone and set it back down on the desk. The silent acquisition was complete. With a single 5-minute phone call, I had just absorbed a $50 million company and placed my future sister-in-law directly under my absolute control. Madison thought she was marrying into wealth and prestige. She thought she was better than the quiet woman sitting across the table at family dinners. She had built her entire arrogant personality on a foundation of corporate success that I now owned completely. I picked up my glass and took another sip of water. I looked out over the sprawling city below me. The streetlights looked like tiny glowing veins pumping life through the concrete grid. Somewhere down there in one of those buildings, Marcus was probably still panicking about his exposed debt. Somewhere down there, my mother was probably still composing angry speeches in her head about what a failure I was. And somewhere down there, Madison was happily polishing her fraudulent engagement ring, completely oblivious to the massive corporate hurricane that was about to hit her. I turned away from the window and walked toward my bedroom. I was sitting at my custom obsidian desk on the 60th floor of the Aura Holdings Tower, long before the rest of the city had finished their first cup of coffee. Today was the day the Vanguard Public Relations Management Team was scheduled to arrive for their mandatory integration briefing. I had instructed my security team to grant me direct audio and video access to the high-definition feeds in the main lobby. I tapped my tablet screen, bringing the marble lobby into focus. At exactly 8:45, the revolving glass doors spun, and the Vanguard executives began to trickle in. Most of them looked pale, nervous, and clutching briefcases like life preservers in a stormy sea. But then Madison Avery walked through the heavy doors, and the entire energy of the room shifted into something aggressively obnoxious. She was wearing a tailored, cream-colored pantsuit that screamed old money aesthetic, but I knew it was bought on credit. Her blonde hair was blown out to absolute perfection, and she was holding a massive iced coffee in one hand, but it was her other hand doing the real talking. She stopped in the middle of the lobby, forcing her nervous colleagues to gather around her like loyal subjects. She deliberately raised her left hand to push a stray lock of hair behind her ear, making sure the overhead chandelier light caught the massive diamond engagement ring. That was the $25,000 rock my brother Marcus bought, using a high-interest loan he was defaulting on. It was a glittering monument to their shared financial delusion. "Oh my God, this lobby is so sterile," Madison announced loudly to her coworkers. Her voice echoed off the high ceilings, piercing the low murmur of the morning commute. "It feels very new money, do you not think? My fiancé Marcus told me corporate spaces need warmth. His family has incredible taste. They are very prominent locally." But her breathtaking arrogance was just getting started. Madison broke away from her group and marched confidently toward the main reception desk. The desk was manned by Chloe, a brilliant 22-year-old junior human resources coordinator who had graduated at the top of her class. Chloe was young, eager, and unfortunately exactly the kind of person Madison loved to steamroll. "Excuse me," Madison said, snapping her fingers lightly to get Chloe's attention. Chloe looked up, offering a warm, professional smile. "Good morning. Welcome to Aura Holdings," Chloe said politely. "You must be with the Vanguard integration team. If you could provide your name, I will get your temporary visitor badge printed out immediately so you can join the others." Visitor badge. Madison repeated, her voice dripping with extreme condescension. "I am not a visitor, honey. I am Madison Avery. I am the Senior Director of Public Relations. I am actually here to transition into upper management. I am going to need you to bypass the standard orientation room and take me directly to my new office. I require a corner suite with south-facing windows. I have a very sensitive creative process and cannot be expected to work in some cramped cubicle with the junior staff." Chloe maintained her professional composure, but I could see the slight hesitation in her eyes. "I am sorry, Ms. Avery, but all Vanguard employees are required to attend the integration briefing. Office assignments have not been finalized yet," Chloe added respectfully. Madison let out an exaggerated sigh, rolling her eyes dramatically toward the ceiling. "Listen, sweetheart. I do not think you understand who you are speaking to. I am not just standard Vanguard personnel. I am marrying into a very powerful, very influential family in this city. My fiancé is a major corporate executive. I have a certain status to maintain. I am sure whoever runs this place would be mortified to know you are treating a senior executive like a common intern. Do you want me to make a phone call and have someone explain corporate hierarchy to you right now, because I will make that call?" Madison was aggressively weaponizing her perceived status and leveraging her privilege against a young black professional simply doing her job. She was using Marcus' fake wealth as a blunt instrument to bully a junior staff member. It was exactly the toxic behavior she exhibited the entire time I had known her. I reached out and tapped a button on my desk console, opening a direct earpiece channel to Chloe. "Do not back down, Chloe," I said, my voice low and steady into the microphone. Tell her conference room B is mandatory. If she refuses, you have my authorization to have security escort her off the premises. I watched Chloe straighten her posture, visibly emboldened by my directive. Ms. Avery? Chloe said, her voice carrying a new weight of authority. Conference room B is mandatory for all acquisitions, regardless of prior title or external family connections. If you are unwilling to comply with Aura Holdings transition protocols, I can call security to assist you out of the building. Madison glared at Chloe, her eyes narrowing into venomous slits. She leaned aggressively over the marble counter, trying to physically intimidate the younger woman. You are making a massive mistake, she hissed. When I meet the CEO, I will personally ensure you are fired immediately. You are just a receptionist. Chloe just smiled warmly and gestured toward the long marble hallway. Conference room B is right down that hall, Ms. Avery. Madison snatched her temporary badge off the polished counter and stormed away, her high heels clicking furiously against the stone floor. I leaned back in my leather chair, taking a slow, deliberate sip of my black coffee. The trap was now fully set, and the completely oblivious prey had walked right in. She desperately wanted to meet the CEO, to aggressively destroy a young black woman's career. She was about to find out and get exactly what she asked for today. The morning dragged on with a series of high-level meetings, but I kept the lobby surveillance feed running silently on my secondary monitor. I watched as Madison was forced to sit through the mandatory human resources integration briefing. She looked absolutely miserable, surrounded by the junior staff she felt so superior to. By noon, the lobby began to fill with employees heading out for their lunch breaks. I leaned forward in my leather chair and turned up the audio feed. Right on cue, the revolving glass doors spun and my brother Marcus walked into the building. He was wearing a sharply tailored navy blue suit that I immediately recognized. It was a designer label he had purchased 2 months ago, using a store credit card that was currently sitting in collections. He held a bouquet of overpriced lilies in his hand, looking around the massive atrium with an expression of performative disdain. He was here to take his future bride out to lunch and play the role of the wealthy executive. Madison spotted him from the elevator bank and rushed over. She threw her arms around his neck, making a huge show of kissing him in front of her new co-workers. Marcus handed her the flowers with a smug smile. He looked up at the towering vaulted ceiling of the Aura Holdings lobby and let out a loud theatrical sigh. He made sure he was standing close enough to the main reception desk so Chloe could hear every single word he said. This place is incredibly gaudy. Madison, he announced, projecting his voice so it echoed across the polished stone floor. I cannot believe Vanguard let themselves be bought out by a company with such terrible aesthetic taste. Look at this lighting. It is completely blinding. Real corporate power does not need to be this flashy. This screams new money. If my firm had acquired your company, I would have fired the interior designer on the very first day. We use imported Italian marble and dark mahogany. This glass and steel look is just so cheap. Madison nodded in eager agreement, clutching the lilies to her chest. I know, baby, she said loudly. I was just telling the receptionist earlier that it feels very sterile in here. It lacks the warmth and prestige of your family spaces. But I suppose we have to endure it until the transition period is over and I can restructure my department. Marcus adjusted his silk tie, checking his reflection in the mirrored pillar next to them. Exactly, he agreed. You are a senior director now. You belong in a premium environment. I was actually talking to my mother about this last night after we dealt with that ridiculous family drama. You know my sister Maya, right? I finally had to put my foot down and put her firmly in her place. I turned the volume dial on my desk console all the way up. I wanted to hear every single delusion leaving his mouth. Madison feigned a look of deep, sympathetic concern. Oh, honey, I am so sorry you had to deal with her again. Your mother told me Maya was acting completely unhinged at dinner. Did she really try to ruin our engagement party? Marcus let out a cruel, condescending laugh. Ruin it, he scoffed. She could never ruin it. She is just a pathetic loser who cannot handle the fact that I am successful and marrying a beautiful high society woman. She showed up to Sunday dinner looking completely out of place. Mom and I had to explicitly ban her from the country club event tonight. We could not risk her walking around talking about her little internet hustle in front of your distinguished parents. You know how she is. She has zero class. What did she do? Madison asked, her eyes wide with fake intrigue. She threw a total tantrum. Marcus lied flawlessly. He was pacing back and forth in the lobby performing for the passing employees. She stormed out of the house like a petulant child. And then, get this, she was so jealous of my financial success that she actually went home and forged a bunch of fake bank statements to make it look like I was in debt. She left them in an envelope for my mother to find. It was the most pathetic, desperate cry for attention I have ever seen. Mom was furious. She completely disowned Maya on the spot. I told you my family does not tolerate toxic behavior. Wow, Madison gasped, shaking her head in mock disbelief. That is genuinely psychotic, Marcus. I am so glad you protected us from her. We do not need that kind of low-class energy dragging us down. You are building an empire and she is just bitter because she dropped out of college and failed at life. Do not even worry about her, Marcus said, waving his hand dismissively. She is permanently cut off. I actually called her last night and demanded she apologize to the family, but she was too cowardly to even have a real conversation. She is probably sitting in her tiny apartment right now crying over how badly she messed up. Anyway, let us get out of this hideous building. I made reservations at that exclusive French bistro downtown. Only the best for my future wife. I sat in my office listening to the absolute fiction pouring from his mouth. He was standing in the lobby of a skyscraper that I owned. He was wearing clothes he could not afford to take a woman out to a lunch he would have to put on a maxed-out credit card. And he was standing there loudly calling me a pathetic loser who had failed at life. The level of cognitive dissonance was truly staggering. He had constructed an entire alternate reality where he was the wealthy hero and I was the miserable villain. I looked at the digital clock on my computer screen. It was 12:15. The lobby was currently packed with over 200 Aura Holdings employees, including the entire newly acquired Vanguard management team. It was the absolute perfect audience for a corporate execution. I stood up from my desk and smoothed down the front of my tailored blazer. I walked over to the full-length mirror in the corner of my office. I checked my reflection, ensuring not a single hair was out of place. My posture was straight. My expression was perfectly neutral. I did not look like a jealous sister. I looked like a billionaire CEO about to inspect her property. I picked up my platinum keycard and walked out of the executive suite. My two primary assistants fell into step behind me immediately, without needing to be asked. We walked down the quiet carpeted hallway toward the private executive elevator bank. This specific elevator bypassed all other floors and dropped directly into the center of the main lobby. It was designed for high-profile arrivals and departures. I swiped my platinum card against the security reader. The heavy steel doors slid open instantly. I stepped inside, followed closely by my assistants. I pressed the button for the ground floor. As the elevator began its rapid descent, I felt a sharp thrill of anticipation coursing through my veins. Marcus wanted to put me in my place. He was about to find out that my place was at the absolute top of the food chain. I watched the floor indicator numbers drop rapidly. The trap was sprung, and it was time to close the jaws. The elevator descent was perfectly smooth. I watched the digital display tick down to the lobby level. My two executive assistants stood silently slightly behind me, holding their electronic tablets. The soft chime of the elevator arrival broke the quiet of the cabin. The heavy steel doors glided open, revealing the sprawling sunlit expanse of the main lobby. It was peak lunch hour, and the massive room was buzzing with the low hum of hundreds of conversations. I stepped out of the elevator. The sound of my heels clicking against the imported marble floor was sharp and authoritative. I was wearing a bespoke charcoal suit tailored perfectly to my frame. It was a $5,000 statement of absolute power, and every single employee in that lobby immediately recognized it. As I walked forward, a ripple effect washed over the massive room. The conversations began to die down rapidly. Junior staff members quickly stepped out of my path, lowering their heads in respectful acknowledgement. The newly acquired Vanguard employees, noticing the sudden shift in the room's energy, turned to see what was happening. I kept my gaze fixed straight ahead, projecting an aura of completely untouchable authority. My assistants matched my pace precisely. Then the loud, obnoxious laughter of my brother shattered the growing silence. "Maya, what on earth are you doing here?" Marcus yelled. His voice was incredibly loud, echoing terribly off the high glass walls. He stepped directly into my path, holding that ridiculous bouquet of lilies, with a smug, condescending grin plastered across his face. I stopped walking. My assistant stopped instantly behind me. We were standing right in the center of the lobby. Hundreds of eyes were suddenly locked onto us. "Are you seriously applying for a job here?" Marcus asked, letting out another booming theatrical laugh. He looked me up and down with exaggerated disgust. "Did you actually think you could just walk into a place like Aura Holdings wearing that outfit? They are going to throw you out dressed like a fake. You look absolutely ridiculous. This is a real corporate environment, Maya. It is not one of your cheap little internet pop-up shops. You cannot just fake your way into high society." He turned to look at Madison, who was standing slightly behind him. He expected her to join in his cruel laughter. He expected her to back up his arrogant performance just like she always did at family dinners. But Madison was not laughing. I watched the color completely drain from her face in real time. Her perfect spray tan suddenly looked sickly and pale. Her eyes were wide with pure, unadulterated terror. She was staring directly at me, but she was not seeing the pathetic younger sister Marcus had described. She was seeing the woman who had just ruthlessly purchased her entire company overnight. She was looking at the woman who held her entire professional future in the palm of her hand. The heavy iced coffee cup in her hand began to tremble violently. The plastic rattled loud enough for the people standing nearby to hear it. Marcus, oblivious to her absolute panic, turned back to me. "Look at you," he sneered, shaking his head. "You are so desperate for attention that you followed me here to my fiancé's workplace. You are embarrassing yourself, Maya. Do you want me to call security so they can escort you back to the street where you belong? Because I will do it. I will not let you ruin Madison's big day with your pathetic jealousy." Madison reached out and grabbed his arm. Her manicured fingers dug desperately into the fabric of his cheap navy suit jacket. "Marcus, stop," she whispered. Her voice was shaking so badly she could barely form the words. "What is wrong, baby?" he asked, looking at her with genuine confusion. "Do not worry about her. I told you I handle my crazy family. She is just a jealous loser." Madison pulled his arm harder, practically yanking him backward. "Marcus, shut your mouth right now," she hissed frantically. Her breathing was ragged and panicked. She looked around at the hundreds of employees who were now staring at Marcus with a mixture of horror and pity. Everyone in the lobby knew exactly who I was. The silence in the room was deafening. "Honey?" She stammered, her voice cracking with fear. "Honey, she is the CEO." The words hung in the quiet air of the massive lobby. Marcus blinked. He looked at Madison. Then he looked slowly back at me. The arrogant smirk on his face slowly dissolved into a mask of pure total confusion. His brain was violently struggling to process the information. He looked at my expensive tailored suit. He looked at the two professional assistants standing attentively behind me. He looked at the hundreds of employees who were all standing in respectful silence, waiting for my next move. "The CEO." He repeated, his voice barely a hollow whisper. His jaw went completely slack. The bouquet of lilies in his hand dipped downward as all the strength drained out of his arm. I did not smile, I did not gloat, I did not say a single word to him. Acknowledging his existence in that moment would have been a waste of my valuable time. I simply held his shocked, terrified gaze for 3 long, agonizing seconds. I let him feel the crushing weight of his own profound stupidity. I let him realize that the woman he had just publicly called a fake, a loser, and a peddler was actually the absolute ruler of the empire he was desperately pretending to be a part of. Then I completely dismissed him. I smoothly broke eye contact and continued walking forward. I did not break my stride as I approached the heavy frosted glass doors of the private executive boardroom located at the far end of the lobby. I reached into my pocket and smoothly pulled out my solid platinum access card. I tapped it against the black security reader. The machine let out a sharp, high-pitched beep. The indicator light flashed a brilliant emerald green. The heavy glass doors unlocked and slid open instantly. I walked into the boardroom without ever looking back. My two assistants followed closely behind me, stepping inside the room. The frosted glass doors slid shut, automatically locking, with a heavy metallic click that echoed loudly across the silent lobby. I left Marcus standing completely frozen in the center of the room. He was utterly paralyzed, trapped under the intense burning stares of 200 people. The woman he was trying to impress was hyperventilating next to him, and the sister he had spent his entire life bullying had just demonstrated a level of untouchable power he could not even fathom. His fake wealthy facade had not just cracked, it had been completely atomized in front of a live audience. The absolute humiliation was absolute and complete. His downfall had officially begun. I took my seat at the head of the massive obsidian conference table. My chief operating officer, David, was already waiting for me, with a thick physical file folder resting in front of him. I did not need to explain what had just happened down in the lobby. My security team monitored every inch of this building. David looked at me, his expression completely neutral, but I could see the slight gleam of professional respect in his eyes. "Have security escort the non-employee out of the building immediately," I said, keeping my voice low and even. "If he resists or causes a scene, call the local precinct and have him arrested for trespassing." And David? "Yes, Maya," he replied instantly. "Send someone to collect Madison Avery. Bring her directly up to my private office. It is time for her performance review." I left the boardroom and walked the short distance to my main corner office. The room was expansive and quiet, insulated from the noise of the city below. I sat behind my desk and opened the file David had prepared. It was a comprehensive forensic breakdown of Madison's entire career at Vanguard Public Relations. It was much worse than I had anticipated. 10 minutes later, my office door opened. My assistant stepped aside, allowing Madison to enter. The confident, arrogant woman who had bullied my receptionist earlier that morning was completely gone. She looked small and terrified. Her expensive cream suit suddenly looked baggy on her shrinking frame. She stood awkwardly in the doorway, clutching her iced coffee cup with both hands like a lifeline. "Close the door, Madison," I instructed, pointing to the heavy oak panel. "Take a seat." She obeyed instantly, pushing the door shut with her shoulder and rushing toward the leather guest chair positioned opposite my desk. She sat down, perched on the very edge of the seat. She took a deep, shaky breath and then immediately launched into a frantic, desperate performance. "Maya. Oh my God, Maya." I had absolutely no idea. She started, her voice high and trembling with forced sweetness. "I am so incredibly sorry about what just happened downstairs. You have to believe me. Marcus is just under so much stress right now with the wedding planning and his job. He did not mean any of those awful things he said. You know how brothers can be, right? We are practically family, Maya. We are going to be sisters. I would never ever disrespect my own sister like that." She leaned forward, trying to force a warm, conspiratorial smile onto her pale face. "I have always admired you," she lied smoothly. "Marcus told me you were in sales, but he never mentioned you were running a major corporate empire. It is so inspiring. We can put all this silly family drama behind us right now. I can talk to him. I can make him apologize to you. We can start fresh, just you and me. Sisters building a legacy together." I let her ramble. I sat perfectly still, watching her desperately try to leverage a fake familial bond to save her professional life. She thought I was as easily manipulated as my brother. She thought a few sweet words and the promise of family loyalty would magically erase the fact that she had spent the last 6 months mocking me behind my back. "Are you finished?" I asked, cutting her off mid-sentence. My voice was completely flat, devoid of any warmth or anger. Madison snapped her mouth shut. The fake smile slowly slid off her face, replaced once again by raw fear. "Let us get one thing absolutely straight, Madison," I said, leaning forward, resting my arms on the desk. "You are not my family. You are not my sister. You are marrying a man who just publicly humiliated himself in my lobby, and you are currently sitting in a building that I own completely. I do not have a sister-in-law here. I have a failing middle manager." Madison's eyes widened in shock. The blunt force of my words hit her like a physical blow. She opened her mouth to argue, but I picked up the thick file folder from my desk and slid it forcefully across the polished wood surface. It stopped right at the edge of her side of the desk. "Open it," I commanded. Her hands shook violently as she reached out and flipped open the heavy cardstock cover. She stared at the top page. The color drained from her face for the second time that day. "That is your performance review." I continued, keeping my tone strictly professional and razor sharp. "It is a complete forensic audit of your last 12 months as a senior director at Vanguard. And frankly, Madison, it is a complete disaster. You are currently missing every single key performance indicator required for your position. Your client retention rate is down 20%. Your internal team turnover is the highest in the entire company because you treat your junior staff like personal servants." I watched her eyes dart frantically across the spreadsheets and highlighted figures. She was panicking, realizing that her entire professional facade was just as empty as Marcus' fake wealth. "But the most concerning part of that file," I said, lowering my voice to a dangerous whisper, "is the expense report section. You have been aggressively misusing corporate funds for personal lifestyle enhancements. Fancy lunches, luxury car services, and expensive gifts that you wrote off as client entertainment. You have been using this company as your personal piggy bank to fund the fake high society aesthetic you and my brother are so desperately trying to maintain." "Maya, I can explain," Madison stammered, her hands trembling. "Do not insult my intelligence." "Madison," I snapped coldly, "you are a massive liability to my company. You have exactly 30 days to completely fix these atrocious metrics, or you are permanently fired. Take your file and get out of my office." I watched the heavy oak door click shut behind Madison. The utter silence of my office was a welcome relief. I turned back to my monitor, bringing the lobby camera feed back to the center screen. Marcus was gone. Security had effectively removed him from the premises before I even made it back to my desk. I leaned back and checked my phone. I had 16 missed calls from my mother. It seemed Marcus had wasted absolutely no time running back to Vivian to cry about his massive public humiliation. I ignored the calls and spent the next 3 hours diving deep into corporate strategy meetings. By 2 o'clock, I decided to head down to the first-floor cafe for a late lunch. I stepped off the private elevator and walked into the bustling lobby. As I passed the main security desk, I heard a familiar, high-pitched voice cutting through the ambient noise. "Maya. Oh, sweetie, there you are." I stopped dead in my tracks. I turned around slowly. My mother, Vivian, was standing aggressively in the center of the lobby. She had somehow completely bypassed the initial security checkpoint. She was wearing her Sunday best, a bright floral dress, and an oversized hat that screamed for attention. Her arms were wide open, and she had plastered a huge, terrifyingly fake smile across her face. I felt my jaw tighten. The last time she spoke to me, she had called me a toxic disease and told me I was dead to her. That was less than 24 hours ago. But now, standing in the middle of my multi-billion-dollar company, her entire demeanor had violently shifted. She rushed toward me, completely ignoring the confused stares of my employees. She threw her arms around my stiff shoulders, pulling me into a suffocating hug. "I have been trying to call you all morning," she said loudly. ensuring everyone within a 50-foot radius could hear her performative maternal affection. My beautiful, successful daughter, why did you not tell your own mother that you owned all of this? We are just so incredibly proud of you, honey. I gently but firmly pushed her away, taking a deliberate step back. My expression remained entirely neutral. What are you doing here, Vivian? I asked, keeping my voice low. Vivian, her smile faltered for a fraction of a second before returning with desperate intensity. Do not be like that, Maya. We are family. I just came to check on my little girl. Marcus came home and told me the most amazing news. He said you bought Vanguard Public Relations. He said you are the CEO here. I always knew you were destined for absolute greatness. I always told your father that Maya had the real business mind in this family. The blatant revisionist history was almost physically nauseating. You told me I was a peddler last night, I reminded her coldly. You threw my invitation in the trash and banned me from the engagement party. You literally left a voicemail calling me a psychotic loser because I exposed your son's massive financial debt. She waved her hand dismissively, completely ignoring my words. Oh, Maya, that was just a silly misunderstanding. You know how stressful wedding planning can be. Tensions were just running high. But we are a strong Black family. We do not let little arguments tear us apart. We build generational wealth together. We support our own. That is exactly why I am here right now. Generational wealth. I repeated the term, feeling a bitter laugh rising in my throat. I did not inherit a single dime from you or Dad. I built this empire entirely by myself while you were busy coddling Marcus. So please spare me the inspirational speech. What exactly do you want? My mother leaned in closer, lowering her voice into a conspiratorial whisper. She looked around the lobby quickly before looking back at me with intense, greedy eyes. Okay, listen. She started, her tone shifting from fake sweetness to desperate negotiation. Marcus is in a little bit of trouble. You showed me the papers last night. I did not want to believe it, but he finally confessed everything this morning. He owes about $50,000. He is drowning Maya. If he defaults, his credit will be permanently ruined. He will lose the apartment. Madison might even call off the wedding if her family finds out he is broke. He should have thought about that before he started living a completely fake life, I replied bluntly. His debt is his own problem. I am not his personal bank. Maya. Please, she begged, grabbing my arm. Her nails dug into the fabric of my suit. You have all of this. She gestured wildly around the massive marble lobby. $50,000 is absolutely nothing to you. It is pocket change. You can clear his debt with a single phone call. You have to help your brother. It is your duty to protect this family. We cannot let those white country club people look down on us. If they find out Marcus is broke, they will laugh at us. They will think we are just some ghetto trash trying to play dress up. You have to protect the family name. You mean I have to protect your fragile ego? I corrected her, pulling my arm out of her painful grip. You do not care about Marcus being in debt. You only care about how it makes you look in front of Madison's wealthy parents. You only care about maintaining your fake high society aesthetic. She ignored the truth of my statement, completely bulldozing forward with her demands. And there is one more thing, she added quickly. Marcus said Madison had a meeting with you today. He said you threatened to fire her. You cannot do that, Maya. She is going to be your sister-in-law. You need to promote her. Make her a vice president. Put her in charge of the whole PR department. If she gets a massive promotion, it will completely secure the wedding. Her parents will be so impressed. It is a win for the entire family. I stared at her in utter disbelief. She was demanding that I pay off my brother's massive debt and promote an incompetent, toxic employee to a senior executive level simply to uphold a lie. Vivian. I said, my voice dropping an octave into a cold, dangerous register. You disowned me 12 hours ago because I told you the truth. Now you are standing in my lobby, demanding $50,000 and a corporate vice presidency for a woman who has been actively stealing from my company. Stealing, my mother gasped, stepping back slightly. What are you talking about? I leaned in close so only she could hear my next words. Madison has been embezzling corporate funds to pay for Marcus' fake lifestyle. She is a fraud. Your son is a fraud. And you are a hypocrite. The answer is absolutely no. I am not paying his debt, and I am certainly not promoting that thief. Now leave my building before I have security throw you out. My mother stared at me with wide, unblinking eyes. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The pristine illusion she had meticulously constructed around her golden child was rapidly crumbling right in front of her. But before she could even formulate a denial, the heavy revolving glass doors spun violently. Marcus stormed back into the lobby. He must have been waiting out in his car pacing the sidewalk while he sent our mother in to do his dirty work. When he saw her standing frozen in front of me, he realized her manipulative charm was not working. His face was flushed red with anger and humiliation. He marched directly toward us, ignoring the warning look from the two security guards stationed near the elevators. "What is going on?" he demanded loudly, stepping aggressively between my mother and me. "Mom, did you get the money? Did she clear the accounts?" Vivian looked at him, her expression a mixture of absolute panic and profound confusion. "Marcus, she said your sister is saying terrible things. She is saying Madison is a thief. She is refusing to help us. She says Madison will be fired." Marcus whipped his head around to glare at me. His hands were balled into tight fists at his sides. The veins in his neck were bulging visibly against his stiff white collar. "You are lying," he spat. "You are just trying to ruin my life because you are a bitter, lonely woman. You have all this money and you are going to let your own brother go bankrupt over $50,000. I am not letting you go bankrupt, Marcus." I corrected him calmly, smoothing an invisible crease on my tailored blazer. "You bankrupted yourself. I am simply refusing to be your financial parachute. I am not giving you a single cent, and Madison is finished. If she does not fix her performance metrics in 30 days, she will be terminated, and I will personally hand her corporate embezzlement files over to the authorities." The lobby, which had started to resume its normal volume, suddenly went completely dead silent again. Employees stopped in their tracks holding their breath. The security guards stepped closer, resting their hands on their utility belts ready to intervene. Marcus completely lost whatever tiny fraction of sanity he had left. He threw his arms up in the air and let out a guttural scream of pure, feral frustration. "You cannot do this to me!" he roared, his voice cracking under the immense strain. "I am the man of this family. I am the only son. Do you hear me, Maya? Everything this family has, everything we build is supposed to be mine. You are just a woman. You dropped out. You ran away. You do not deserve any of this. By all rights, half of this entire company should belong to me." I actually laughed out loud. It was a short, sharp sound, completely devoid of any warmth or humor. "Half of my company?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Did you contribute a single dollar to my startup capital, Marcus? Did you work the 80-hour week sleeping on a concrete floor? Did you ruthlessly negotiate the commercial real estate acquisitions that built this empire? No. You were too busy buying tailored suits on credit to impress people who do not even like you. You own absolutely nothing here." "You owe me!" he screamed, taking a highly aggressive step forward. The security guards immediately unclipped their radios, but I held up a single hand signaling them to hold their positions. I wanted to hear exactly how far he was willing to go. "If you do not give me what I want right now, I will destroy you," Marcus threatened, pointing a violently shaking finger directly at my face. "I will go to every single news outlet in this city. I will go to our church. I will go to the entire Black community and expose exactly what you are. I will tell everyone that you are a miserable sellout. I will tell them you hoarded billions of dollars while your own mother faced eviction. I will tell them you abandoned your people and turned your back on your blood just to sit in an ivory tower. I will make sure your name is absolute garbage in this city. No one will ever do business with a traitor." He stood there panting heavily, believing he had just played a devastating trump card. He thought the threat of public shame within our community would terrify me. He thought I was still the scared little girl who desperately craved our mother's approval and feared the harsh judgment of the church congregation. He thought weaponizing our culture would force my hand. I looked at him with absolute chilling pity. "Go ahead, Marcus," I said, my voice echoing clearly across the quiet lobby. "Call the local news. Call the church elders. Call everyone you know. Tell them I refuse to pay off the massive credit card debt you racked up buying fake jewelry for a white woman who steals from my company. Tell them I refuse to fund your pathetic obsession with country club society. Let us see exactly how much sympathy the community has for a grown man begging his younger sister for an allowance." His face dropped instantly. The terrifying reality of his own threat suddenly crashed down on him. Exposing me meant exposing his own massive financial failures. It meant admitting to the entire world that he was completely broke and living a lie. "You are a monster," Vivian whispered, staring at me as if I were a dangerous stranger. "You are no daughter of mine." "I know," I replied softly, my voice as cold as ice. "I am the chief executive officer of Aura Holdings, and you are both trespassing." I turned my head slightly toward the two large security guards who had been waiting patiently for my command. "Escort them out," I ordered firmly. "If they step foot on Aura Holdings property ever again, do not even bother calling me. Just call the local police and press formal criminal trespassing charges." "You cannot do this to us," Marcus yelled, as the guards stepped forward, grabbing him firmly by the upper arms. "Let go of me right now. I am her brother. I am an executive." The guards completely ignored his frantic protests, easily marching him backward toward the revolving glass doors. Vivian let out a dramatic wail, clutching her chest as if she were having a sudden heart attack. But one of the guards gently but firmly placed a hand on her shoulder and guided her out right behind her screaming son. I stood perfectly still in the center of the marble lobby and watched as they were physically pushed out onto the busy city sidewalk. Marcus was still screaming, hitting the thick glass of the revolving door with his fists. Vivian was crying hysterically, pointing a shaking, accusing finger at me through the window. But the heavy soundproof glass blocked out all of their noise. They were just silent, angry figures standing in the afternoon sun, completely powerless against the empire I built. I turned around and looked at my employees. They were all staring at me, their eyes wide with a mixture of profound shock and deep professional respect. "Lunch break is over," I announced calmly, projecting my voice across the expansive room. "Let us get back to work." I walked toward the private elevator without looking back a single time. The first wave of their desperate retaliation had been crushed effortlessly, but I knew my mother and Marcus would not stop here. They were deeply wounded animals backed into a dangerous corner, and they were about to get much worse. I did not have to wait long to see exactly how much worse it would get. 2 days later, the real retaliation began, and it did not come from my mother, screaming in a lobby. It came from the woman who actually knew how to manipulate public perception. It was early Wednesday morning when my chief operating officer, David, walked into my private office without bothering to knock. His face was completely pale, and his jaw was set in a tight, grim line. He walked directly to my desk and placed his digital tablet face down on the polished obsidian surface. "You need to read this immediately, Maya," he said, his voice unusually tense. "It is already trending across the entire financial district." I picked up the tablet and flipped it over. The screen displayed the front page of the City Financial Review, which was the most widely read corporate journal in the state. The headline was printed in bold, aggressive letters that seemed to jump off the screen. "Toxic Empire: How One Anonymous CEO Uses Corporate Acquisitions to Settle Petty Family Vendettas." I felt a cold prickle of warning at the base of my neck as I began to read the article. Madison had bypassed my authority entirely and weaponized her deepest industry connections. She had leaked a highly damaging anonymous exposé. She was smart enough not to use my actual name, but she explicitly named Aura Holdings and Vanguard Public Relations. The article painted a horrifying picture of a deranged, vindictive executive who orchestrated a $50 million hostile takeover for the sole purpose of terrorizing a specific middle manager. The piece detailed the lobby incident, but completely twisted the narrative into a tale of corporate abuse. It claimed I had ambushed a dedicated, hardworking PR director out of pure spite. It alleged that I was insanely jealous of this director's upcoming wedding to my successful brother, and that I was using my immense corporate power to destroy her career and ruin her life. Madison had woven a masterful web of lies, portraying herself as the ultimate professional victim, crushed under the heel of a corrupt billionaire. She even included anonymous quotes from insiders who claimed I had a history of mental instability and family estrangement. I knew instantly those quotes were provided by Marcus and my mother. They had all teamed up to execute a coordinated public execution. "This is a complete disaster," David said, pacing the length of my office. "The Journal published it as an exclusive investigative piece. They did not even reach out to our legal department for a comment before taking it live. Madison must have called in every single favor she had with their editorial board. Our public relations monitoring software is going crazy. The link is being forwarded through every major investment firm in the city. People are starting to ask questions about our corporate governance." Before I could even formulate a response, the secure private line on my desk began to ring loudly. It was the red phone reserved exclusively for the Aura Holdings Board of Directors. I looked at David and he stopped pacing. I reached out and picked up the heavy receiver. "Maya, we have a massive problem." The voice on the other end was Richard, the senior chairman of the board. He did not bother with any polite greetings. His tone was sharp and furious. "Have you seen the piece in the Financial Review?" "I am reading it right now, Richard," I replied, keeping my voice perfectly steady and devoid of panic. "It is a fabricated hit piece. It was written by a disgruntled Vanguard employee who I just placed on a strict performance improvement plan for blatant corporate embezzlement. She is retaliating because she knows she is about to be terminated." Richard let out a harsh, frustrated sigh that crackled over the phone speaker. "It does not matter if it is fabricated, Maya," he snapped aggressively. "It does not matter if she is embezzling. What matters are the optics, and right now the optics are completely radioactive. The article explicitly mentions your family. It mentions a wedding and a brother. Are you seriously using company funds and corporate acquisitions to harass your future sister-in-law?" "I acquired Vanguard because their market share in digital media perfectly aligns with our expansion goals," I countered firmly. "The fact that my brother is engaged to one of their failing directors is merely an unfortunate coincidence." "Well, the market does not believe in coincidences," Richard shot back. "My phone has been ringing off the hook all morning. Our major institutional investors are panicking. They are asking if we are exposing the firm to a massive wrongful termination lawsuit. They are asking if our CEO is mingling personal family disputes with corporate strategy. If you are using this company to settle your own family drama, that is a massive breach of your fiduciary duty. We cannot have the leader of this conglomerate acting like a reality television star airing her dirty laundry in the financial press." I felt the walls of my office suddenly closing in. Madison had played an incredibly strategic and dangerous hand. She knew she could not beat me in a boardroom, so she took the fight to the court of public opinion. By making these accusations public, she had successfully forced my own board of directors to turn against me. "The board is convening an emergency meeting at 4:00 this afternoon," Richard demanded, his voice leaving zero room for negotiation. "We want a full explanation, Maya. We want absolute concrete proof that this article is a lie. If you cannot provide irrefutable evidence that this employee is actually stealing from the company and that this acquisition was strictly business, we will be forced to suspend you immediately pending a full external investigation. We will not let your toxic family drama tank our quarterly earnings and destroy our stock price. Be ready." Richard slammed the phone down, leaving a heavy dial tone ringing loudly in my ear. I slowly placed the receiver back onto the cradle. I looked up at David, who was watching me with deep concern. "What did Richard say?" David asked quietly. "He said I have until 4:00 to prove my innocence," I replied, staring blankly at the tablet on my desk. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the true weight of the situation. Madison had effectively paralyzed me, using my own corporate governance structure against me. If I fired her right now, it would look exactly like the article predicted. It would look like an angry, vindictive CEO retaliating against a whistleblower. I was backed into a very tight corner. My family had finally found a way to threaten the one thing I cared about more than anything else, which was the empire I built with my own two hands. They wanted a war, and they had just fired a massive missile directly at my foundation. They wanted a war, and they had just fired a massive missile directly at my foundation. I sat in the silence of my office, staring at the blank wall. My corporate phone was still ringing with frantic calls from investors, but suddenly my personal cell phone sitting on the edge of the desk began to vibrate. It buzzed once, then twice. Within 10 seconds, it was vibrating continuously in a relentless, angry rhythm. I frowned and picked it up. The screen was flooded with notifications. They were not emails from my board of directors. They were text messages from my aunts, my cousins, and elderly women from my childhood neighborhood. I unlocked the screen and opened the first message from Aunt Sarah. "You should be ashamed of yourself, Maya. Money has truly corrupted your soul." I swiped to the next message from Deacon Hayes. "The Lord sees your wicked heart. How can you abandon your own flesh and blood?" The messages poured in one after another, a relentless digital avalanche of disgust and condemnation. My heart pounded against my ribs. I did not understand how the entire community had mobilized so quickly. The financial article was strictly corporate news. Our church community did not read the city financial review. Then a video file popped up from my cousin Keisha. The caption read simply, "I cannot believe you did this." I tapped the play button, and the screen expanded. The video was unsteady, clearly recorded on a cell phone from the middle pews of Greater Hope Fellowship. It was Wednesday afternoon, which meant it was the midday testimony service. The sanctuary was packed with the most influential members of our local Black community. The camera zoomed in on the wooden altar. Standing behind the microphone, clutching a crumpled tissue, was my mother, Vivian. She looked incredibly fragile. She had purposely worn an old faded dress I had not seen in years, completely abandoning her usual flashy Sunday attire. Her shoulders were slumped, and she was weeping openly. Her voice echoed through the massive church speakers, trembling with raw, manufactured grief. "Church family," she sobbed, dabbing at her dry eyes. "I stand before you today a broken woman. I have tried so hard to raise my children in the light of the Lord. I have sacrificed everything for them. But the devil is busy, and he has taken hold of my daughter Maya." A collective gasp rippled through the congregation. The camera shook slightly as people leaned forward in their wooden pews. I watched my mother expertly manipulate the crowd, playing the role of the ultimate grieving matriarch. "I just found out that my Maya is incredibly wealthy." My mother continued, her voice cracking perfectly on cue. "She is the head of a massive corporation. She has millions of dollars. But while she lives in a glass tower, she has completely turned her back on her family. She is actively trying to destroy her brother Marcus and ruin his beautiful upcoming wedding just out of spite. But church, that is not even the worst part." My mother paused for dramatic effect, leaning heavily against the wooden podium. She let out a loud, tragic wail. "The bank is taking my home," she cried out loudly. "The house where I raised my babies, the house where we hosted so many church dinners. It is going into foreclosure." I went to Maya. I begged my own flesh and blood for help just to keep a roof over my head. And do you know what she did? She laughed in my face. She called security and had me physically thrown out onto the street. My own daughter is letting me become homeless while she sits on a mountain of money. The sanctuary erupted. Outrage echoed through the vaulted ceilings. I could hear women shouting shameful and "Lord have mercy." The pastor stepped forward, placing a comforting hand on my mother's shaking shoulder, looking out at the congregation with deep sorrow. The video abruptly cut to black. I sat perfectly still, the cold glass of the phone pressed against my palm. The sheer audacity of her lie was breathtaking. She had taken Marcus' threat to expose me and executed it with flawless precision. She knew exactly how to weaponize the cultural values of our community. In our world, disrespecting your mother and abandoning your family were the ultimate unforgivable sins. She had intentionally framed herself as a destitute victim and painted me as a greedy, assimilated monster who had forgotten where she came from. The phone continued to buzz relentlessly. I was being exiled from my own community in real time. My mother thought this public shaming would break me. She thought combining the pressure from my corporate board with the intense social pressure of our church would force me to surrender. She expected me to call her begging for forgiveness, offering to pay off Marcus' debt and save her house just to stop the public humiliation. She was leveraging decades of respectability politics against me, using the congregation as her personal army to tear down my absolute boundaries. But she had made one massive fatal miscalculation in her theatrical performance. She stood at a sacred altar and boldly lied about her house going into foreclosure. She lied to the entire congregation to garner sympathy. I did not feel the urge to cry. I did not feel ashamed. I felt a surge of absolute razor-sharp clarity. The panic from the board meeting completely evaporated. My family wanted to play a public game of reputation destruction. They wanted to use the media and the church to force me into submission. But they did not realize I held the ultimate trump card. I picked up my corporate phone and dialed David. He answered immediately. David, call Richard and the board. I instructed, my voice completely steady and devoid of emotion. Tell them I will not need until 4 o'clock. Tell them to convene the emergency meeting in exactly 1 hour. And David, I need you to retrieve a specific legal document from my private trust vault. What document? David asked, sensing the absolute resolve in my tone. The property deed to my mother's house, I replied smoothly. It is time to show the board and my family exactly who holds the power. I am going to end this entire circus today. I will not allow my hard-earned legacy to be dismantled by a fabricated smear campaign and a church performance. The eviction notices are going to be drawn up immediately. They wanted to paint me as the ultimate villain, so I will happily play the absolute role and collect what is rightfully and legally mine. The eviction notices are going to be drawn up immediately. They wanted to paint me as the ultimate villain, so I will happily play the absolute role and collect what is rightfully and legally mine. But dealing with my mother and her pathetic church performance was only half the battle. I still had an emergency board meeting in less than an hour, and I needed to completely destroy the narrative Madison had planted in the financial press. If Madison wanted to use her connections to wage a public war of perception, I was going to use my capital to wage a private war of absolute truth. I ended the call with David and immediately dialed another highly secure number. It was the direct line to Elias Vance, a former federal agent who now ran the most exclusive and ruthless private intelligence firm in the city. Aura Holdings kept Elias on a massive retainer specifically for deep corporate background checks. Elias, I need a full shadow dossier, I said the moment he answered. I need everything you can possibly find on a woman named Madison Avery and her entire immediate family. I do not care how many analysts you have to pull off other projects. I want their bank records, tax liens, property deeds, and credit histories. I want to know exactly what is hiding behind their country club facade. You will have it in 30 minutes, Maya Elias replied, his tone all business. We already started digging the moment that article hit the press. I will bring the physical file directly to your office. True to his word exactly. 28 minutes later, the heavy oak door of my office swung open. Elias walked in carrying a thick black leather folder. He did not look panicked. In fact, he looked thoroughly amused. He tossed the folder onto my desk. You are going to love this, he said, leaning back against the doorframe. Madison Avery is a complete fraud. Her entire family is a carefully constructed financial illusion. I opened the black folder and began flipping through the heavily documented pages. The deeper I read, the more my lips curled into a cold, satisfied smile. The Avery family used to have money about 3 generations ago. But Madison's father had completely squandered the remaining family trust in a series of disastrous commercial real estate investments during the 2008 market crash. They were entirely flat broke. Look at page 4, Elias instructed, pointing to a highlighted financial summary. They do not own that massive estate in the suburbs. It is heavily mortgaged and currently in pre-foreclosure. Their luxury vehicles are all leased under a shell company that is currently being audited by the IRS. And that prestigious country club membership they constantly brag about. It was quietly suspended 6 months ago due to severe non-payment of their annual dues. I stared at the paperwork, piecing the massive puzzle together. The sheer brilliant irony of the situation suddenly washed over me. Madison had leaked that article to protect her job because her job was the only actual income keeping her afloat. She had desperately clung to Marcus because he wore designer suits, flashed expensive watches, and bragged constantly about his high-level corporate position. She genuinely believed she had snagged a wealthy executive who could rescue her family from their hidden financial ruin. And Marcus, I realized, speaking my thoughts out loud. Marcus targeted Madison because she presented the ultimate image of untouchable white high society. He thought marrying into the Avery family would instantly elevate his social status and provide him with an endless safety net of generational wealth. He was maxing out high-interest credit cards to buy her $25,000 engagement rings and book expensive French bistros just to keep up the charade. Elias chuckled darkly. Exactly. They are both broke. They are two desperate gold diggers frantically trying to scam each other. Marcus is mining an empty quarry, and Madison is trying to drain a dry well. Neither of them has a single dime to their actual name. They are riding a fast train to absolute nowhere. The magnitude of their mutual delusion was staggering. My brother had alienated his own sister, screamed at me in a public lobby, and allowed our mother to humiliate herself at church, all to protect an engagement built on a massive two-sided financial lie. He was willing to destroy my billion-dollar empire just to secure a woman who was actively planning to drain the wealth he did not even possess. He was throwing away his own flesh and blood for a total mirage. "This is perfect," I whispered, closing the black leather folder. "This is exactly what I need for the board of directors." Elias nodded, pushing off the doorframe. I included the wire transfer receipts showing Madison moving corporate funds from Vanguard into a private offshore account to pay her parents' property taxes. That is hard, undeniable proof of felony embezzlement. The board cannot argue with federal banking records. The smear campaign in the Financial Journal will instantly become a huge liability to Vanguard, not Aura Holdings. We have her entirely dead to rights today. "Thank you, Elias," I said, standing up from my desk. "Your retainer is being doubled effective immediately." Great work on this file. I gathered the thick stack of evidence. I had Madison's embezzlement records. I had the Avery family bankruptcy documents. I had the original deed to my mother's house proving I was the sole legal owner. And I had the digital copy of the vicious voicemail my mother had left me just 3 days prior, calling me a psychotic loser. I had every single weapon I needed to execute a flawless corporate and familial slaughter. I checked my watch carefully. It was 3:55 in the afternoon. The board of directors was waiting for me in the executive conference room. Richard and the other investors thought they were about to interrogate a panicked, emotional woman who had let family drama spill into the corporate sphere. They were about to learn that I did not let family drama affect my business. I simply crushed the people who threatened my business regardless of their bloodline. I picked up the files, straightened my custom blazer, and confidently walked out the door right now. I walked into the executive conference room precisely at 4 o'clock. Richard and the 7 other board members were seated around the massive table, looking grim and ready for a corporate execution. I did not even bother sitting down. I walked directly to the center of the table and dropped the thick black leather folder right in front of Richard. "Read the first 3 pages." I instructed, my voice echoing in the tense silence. "Those are federal banking records." The anonymous whistleblower who leaked that defamatory article is Madison Avery. She is not a victim. She is actively embezzling corporate funds from our newly acquired Vanguard marketing accounts to pay her personal property taxes and fund her fake lifestyle. The article was a desperate smokescreen to avoid her impending termination. Richard opened the folder. His eyes scanned the highlighted wire transfers. The heavy tension in the room instantly evaporated completely, replaced by cold corporate fury. He looked up at me and closed the folder. "Handle it, Maya," he said sharply. "Make an absolute example out of her." I nodded. I turned to my Chief Operating Officer David, who was standing by the door. "Call a mandatory all-hands meeting in the main auditorium," I ordered. "Every single employee from Aura Holdings and Vanguard needs to be there in 15 minutes." By 4:30, the massive state-of-the-art auditorium on the second floor was standing room only. Over 1,000 employees filed into the plush stadium seating. The low murmur of anxious whispers filled the cavernous space. Everyone had read the City Financial Review article on their phones. They all thought they were about to witness the public downfall of their chief executive officer. I stood backstage watching the live security feed on a monitor. My eyes scanned the front row of the audience. I found exactly who I was looking for. Madison. Avery was sitting directly in the center seat. She was wearing a perfectly tailored white dress projecting the image of absolute innocence. She had her legs elegantly crossed and she was whispering confidently to the junior manager sitting next to her. A smug, arrogant smirk was plastered across her heavily contoured face. She honestly believed she had won. She thought the board of directors had forced me to call this massive assembly to publicly step down or offer a humiliating corporate apology. She thought her media leak was the ultimate checkmate. She had absolutely no idea she was sitting on a live landmine. I signaled the audio technician to cut the house music. I walked out from behind the heavy velvet curtains and stepped up to the acrylic podium, positioned center stage. The chatter in the auditorium died instantly. Over 1,000 pairs of eyes locked onto me. I looked directly down at the front row, making immediate eye contact with Madison. Her smirk grew slightly wider. She tilted her chin up, radiating false superiority. "Good afternoon, everyone," I said, leaning into the microphone. My voice was calm, even, and projected clearly. Through the surround sound speakers, I am sure you have all seen the explosive article published in the City Financial Review this morning. It makes several severe allegations regarding my leadership and the recent acquisition of Vanguard Public Relations. It accuses me of using corporate leverage to settle a petty family vendetta. Transparency is the absolute foundation of Aura Holdings. When serious allegations are made, we do not hide behind press releases. We address them directly with hard, undeniable facts. Madison nodded slowly in the front row, pretending to look deeply concerned for the company. She was completely eating up the performance. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small laser clicker. I pressed the main button. The massive 50-foot digital screen behind me suddenly illuminated the darkened stage. But it did not display a corporate apology letter. It displayed a highly detailed financial spreadsheet. The collective breath of the entire auditorium hitched. Madison stopped, nodding. Her posture instantly went completely rigid. "What you are looking at is the Vanguard Public Relations Q3 marketing budget," I announced, pacing slowly across the stage. "Specifically, you are looking at the discretionary vendor fund managed directly by the Senior Director of Public Relations." I clicked the button again. A red circle appeared around a specific line item. On the 14th of last month, exactly $15,000 was authorized for a corporate branding retreat, but that money never went to a vendor. I clicked the remote a third time. A second document appeared right next to the spreadsheet. It was a federal wire transfer receipt. As you can see, I continued, my voice rising in volume and authority. The $15,000 was immediately wired into an offshore holding account, and from that account it was transferred directly to a high-end jewelry district retailer downtown. I clicked the remote one final time. A high-resolution image of a diamond engagement ring receipt flashed onto the massive screen. The date of the purchase matched the exact date of the corporate wire transfer. The name on the receipt was Marcus, and the woman wearing that exact $15,000 stolen diamond ring is sitting right here in the front row. I pointed my laser directly at Madison Avery. The bright green dot rested perfectly on her chest. The entire auditorium collectively gasped. Over 1,000 heads whipped around to stare directly at Madison. The smug, arrogant smirk had completely vanished from her face. Her skin turned the color of wet ash. She instinctively grabbed her left hand, trying to hide the massive diamond ring from the hundreds of horrified eyes suddenly burning into her. Her fake high society world had just violently collapsed on a 50-foot screen in front of her entire professional network. There was absolutely nowhere left for her to hide from the devastating truth. She was caught committing a very serious federal crime right in front of her peers. The silence in the auditorium was so profound that I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning unit working overhead. Then the dam broke completely. A tidal wave of gasps, whispers, and muffled exclamations washed over the crowd. The junior manager sitting next to Madison scrambled out of his seat, almost tripping over his own feet to create a physical distance between himself and the exposed criminal. It was as if her fraud were a highly contagious disease. Madison was hyperventilating now. Her hands frantically grasped at the collar of her expensive white dress, her chest heaving as she struggled to pull air into her lungs. "Maya, please," she stammered, her voice barely audible over the rising noise of the shocked employees. "This is a massive misunderstanding. I can explain the wire transfer. It was a vendor error. Someone in accounting made a horrible mistake." I did not even blink. I pressed a button on the podium console signaling David at the back of the room. "I do not need an explanation, Madison," I said, my voice cutting through the chatter and silencing the room once again. "I need you to stand up right now." At that exact moment, the heavy double doors at the back of the auditorium swung open with a loud, echoing thud. 4 members of our executive corporate security team marched down the center aisle. Right behind them were 2 fully uniformed officers from the City Police Department Financial Crimes Division. The sight of the police badges gleaming under the bright auditorium lights sent a fresh shockwave through the audience. People physically leaned away from the center aisle, pressing their backs against their chairs as the officers approached the front row. Madison's eyes darted from the approaching officers back to me. The reality of the situation finally pierced through her thick wall of entitlement. This was not a petty family dispute she could manipulate her way out of with fake tears and empty apologies. This was a severe criminal investigation, and she was the primary target. "No," she whispered, shaking her head violently, sending her perfect blonde hair falling across her face. "No, you cannot do this. We are family, Maya. We are going to be sisters." The police officers stopped at the end of her row. "Mom," one of the officers said, his voice deep and entirely authoritative. "We need you to step out into the aisle and keep your hands where we can see them." Madison completely unraveled. The arrogant high society persona shattered into a million irreparable pieces. She stumbled out of her plush theater seat and immediately dropped to her knees right there on the carpeted floor of the auditorium. She ignored the heavily armed officers and looked directly up at me on the stage. Thick black tears of ruined mascara were streaming down her perfectly contoured face, destroying her expensive makeup. "Maya, please, I am begging you," she sobbed, clasping her hands together in a desperate, frantic plea. "Please do not let them take me away. I will give the money back. I swear to God, I will pay back every single cent." It was Marcus. He made me do it. He told me he was incredibly wealthy, but he was completely broke. He pressured me to keep up appearances. He forced me to buy that ring so his mother would not find out the brutal truth about his massive debts. I was just trying to survive the pressure. I looked down at her, feeling absolutely zero pity. She was completely willing to destroy my entire career and reputation just hours ago. Now she was instantly throwing the man she supposedly loved straight under the bus to save her own skin. You leaked a highly defamatory article to the press this morning claiming I was an abusive executive, I said, keeping my tone completely clinical and detached. You actively attempted to destroy the stock value of this company and trigger a federal board investigation simply to cover up your own theft. You did not do that because of Marcus. You did it because you are fundamentally dishonest. You used your perceived white privilege and your fake social status to bully my junior staff. And when you finally got caught, you tried to burn my entire empire to the ground. I will cancel the wedding, Madison wailed, her voice echoing pathetically across the massive room. I will do anything, Maya. I will leave Marcus today. I will never speak to him or your mother ever again. I will scrub the floors of this building if you want me to. Just please call off the police. I cannot go to jail, Maya. I have never been in trouble before. My family will be completely ruined by this scandal. Your family is already ruined. Madison, I corrected her coldly. I had my private intelligence team pull your full background file this afternoon. I know your father lost the family trust years ago. I know your childhood house is in active foreclosure, and your prestigious country club membership is permanently suspended. You and Marcus are a truly perfect match. You are both completely empty vessels trying to scam each other into a luxurious lifestyle neither of you can actually afford. The crowd murmured loudly at this shocking revelation. The Vanguard employees who had suffered under Madison's tyrannical leadership for the past year watched with wide eyes as her entire fabricated life was laid bare on a public stage. She had terrorized them with her fake wealth, and now they knew she was poorer than most of the junior interns. As the Chief Executive Officer of Aura Holdings, I am officially terminating your employment effective immediately. I announced, my voice ringing with absolute finality. You will surrender your corporate access badge, your company devices, and any other proprietary materials currently in your possession. You are permanently banned from all Aura Holdings properties and subsidiary locations. I stepped back from the podium and looked at the two police officers waiting patiently in the aisle. Officers, she is all yours. Madison let out a loud, guttural scream as the officers stepped forward and grabbed her firmly by the upper arms, hauling her up from the floor. She thrashed weakly against their grip, but they easily secured her wrists behind her back. The sharp metallic click of the steel handcuffs echoing in the silent auditorium was the most incredibly satisfying sound I had heard all week. You have the right to remain silent, the officer recited, reading her Miranda rights loud and clear as they physically marched her up the center aisle. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. Madison continued to sob loudly, her head hanging down in absolute devastating shame as she was paraded past hundreds of her former colleagues. Nobody looked away. Nobody offered her a single shred of sympathy. They watched the woman who had tormented them finally face the absolute unyielding consequences of her own arrogance and greed. The heavy auditorium doors closed shut behind them, cutting off the pathetic sound of her crying. The massive room was completely silent once again. I walked back to the microphone and looked out over the sea of stunned faces. Let this serve as the absolute only warning I will ever give, I said, addressing the entire company. Aura Holdings operates on excellence, integrity, and absolute accountability. I do not care who you know. I do not care who you are dating. And I certainly do not care who your family is. If you steal from this company, you will face the maximum penalty of the law. This meeting is adjourned. Return to your desks immediately. I turned off the microphone and walked confidently off the stage. The corporate cancer had been successfully excised. My board of directors had their undeniable proof, and my company's stock price was entirely secure. But the war was not entirely over yet. Madison was currently on her way to a cold downtown jail cell, which meant my brother Marcus was about to find out his fake heiress was a convicted felon. I knew my mother and my brother would be looking for someone to desperately blame for this massive catastrophe. I headed straight back to my executive office, entirely ready for the final violent collision. I sat behind my massive obsidian desk, the heavy doors firmly closed. I knew it was only a matter of time. News of an arrest spreads faster than a wildfire, and Madison would have used her call to contact my brother. I rested my hands on the cool surface, waiting for the inevitable explosion. I did not feel any fear. I only felt a deep, profound sense of finality. The war they started was finally arriving at my absolute doorstep. It took 45 minutes. The oak doors of my office were violently shoved apart, slamming against the walls with a deafening crack. My executive assistant let out a startled shout, but she was pushed aside. Marcus and my mother stormed in like rabid animals. I recognized the crazed look in their eyes. They had bypassed security tailgating an executive group into the private elevator bank. Two guards sprinted into the room right behind them, reaching for their radios. The guards looked incredibly tense, ready to physically tackle Marcus to the floor. "Stand down," I instructed, keeping my voice level. "Just wait outside." The guards hesitated but nodded, pulling the heavy doors shut behind them. I was trapped with the two most toxic people I knew. Marcus looked completely unhinged. His expensive tailored navy suit was heavily wrinkled. His tie hung crookedly around his neck, and his face was flushed a dangerous purple. He marched up to my desk, slamming his fists onto the surface. He was breathing heavily like a wild, cornered animal, desperately searching for an escape route that did not exist. "What did you do?" he screamed, his voice breaking. He leaned over the desk, his eyes wide with panic. "What did you do to Madison? I just got a call from the downtown precinct. They told me my fiancée is sitting in a jail cell." "I did not do anything to Madison," I replied calmly. "She embezzled $15,000 from this company to buy the engagement ring you are currently paying off on a credit card. She is a criminal, Marcus. She committed federal fraud, and I handed her over." "You are a liar," my mother shrieked, stepping out. Vivian looked on the absolute brink of a psychological collapse. Her fake tears and fragile matriarch persona had been replaced by venomous fury. She pointed a shaking index finger directly at my face. She looked like she wanted to reach across the desk and physically strangle me with her bare hands. "You set her up!" Vivian screamed, pitching her voice so high it physically hurt. "You planted those records because you are a jealous monster. You could not stand the fact that your brother was marrying into high society. You had to destroy his wedding to make yourself feel incredibly powerful." I looked at her with genuine disbelief. Faced with undeniable banking records and police intervention, they were completely committed to their delusion. They refused to accept that Madison was a broke criminal. They needed a scapegoat. "She is not high society, Mom," I stated coldly. "She is completely broke. Her family lost their money over a decade ago. Their house is in active foreclosure. Madison was marrying Marcus because she thought he was a wealthy executive who could bail her family out. And Marcus was marrying Madison because he wanted a white country club wife to elevate his fake status. They were running a pathetic scam on each other." "Shut up," Marcus roared, sweeping his arm across my desk. He knocked a crystal paperweight onto the floor. The glass shattered against the hardwood, but I did not flinch. I watched a grown man disintegrate. "You completely ruined my entire life," he sobbed, gripping the edges of my desk. "The wedding is permanently canceled. The country club is going to revoke our application. Everyone in the city is going to laugh at me, Maya. You have completely destroyed the perfect image of this family. I can never show my face in elite society ever again because of your selfish, horrific actions." "The perfect image." I repeated, my tone dripping with disgust. "The image was a total lie. You are $80,000 in debt. You are defaulting on your car payments. You are a financial failure trying to play dress-up in an empire that I built." My mother let out a loud cry of absolute rage, slamming her hands down next to Marcus. "You listen to me right now, you ungrateful witch," Vivian hissed. "I am not going to let you embarrass this family. I am taking you to court. I am going to hire the most ruthless, expensive legal team in this state. We are suing you for defamation and malicious prosecution." We will drag your name through the mud until your board fires you and strips you of every single last penny. I raised an eyebrow, looking completely unbothered by her explosive legal threats. And exactly how do you plan to afford the most expensive legal team in the state, Vivian? I will sell the family estate, she screamed proudly, slamming her palm against the desk. I will sell the house right now. I will liquidate the property that your father and I worked our entire lives to build. I will cash out every single dime of equity just to make sure you pay for what you have done. I will not stop fighting until you are completely bankrupt and begging us for a single piece of bread in the street. I stared into her furious, vindictive eyes. She genuinely believed she had a massive financial asset she could weaponize against me to protect her golden child. She thought the house was her ultimate safety net. It was the exact critical moment I had been eagerly waiting for all week. I took a very slow, deep breath, silently savoring the quiet power I held. The absolute peak of her towering arrogance had finally arrived right before the entire foundation crumbled into dust forever. The absolute peak of her towering arrogance had finally arrived right before the entire foundation crumbled into dust forever. I did not get angry at all. I did not raise my voice or call for the security guards waiting just outside my door. Instead, I let a slow, chilling smile spread completely across my face. It was the kind of smile that made the temperature in the room plummet rapidly. My mother stopped yelling. Her chest was heaving, but she took a small, uncertain step backward. She was expecting me to beg or to show fear at the prospect of a massive legal battle. She was not expecting me to look at her like a predator watching a mouse walk willingly into a trap. Marcus noticed my expression too. He stopped pacing and stared at me with wide, terrified eyes. He had seen this exact same look on my face right before I destroyed Madison in the auditorium. "Sell the house, Vivian," I said softly, letting the silence stretch out between my words. "Sell the sprawling family estate. Cash out all the equity. That is a truly brilliant legal strategy. There is only one tiny little problem with your master plan." I reached down and grabbed the brass handle of my bottom desk drawer. I pulled it open with a smooth metallic glide. I reached inside and pulled out the thick, heavy legal binder Elias had delivered to me earlier that afternoon. I lifted it high and dropped it squarely onto the center of my obsidian desk. The heavy thud echoed loudly in the quiet office, making both my mother and brother flinch physically. "You cannot sell something you do not own," I stated plainly. My mother scoffed, rolling her eyes, though her hands were visibly shaking. "What nonsense are you talking about now, Maya? Your father and I bought that house 30 years ago. The deed is in my name. I own it free and clear." "Open the binder, Vivian," I commanded. She refused to move, glaring at me with stubborn pride, but Marcus could not handle the suspense. He lunged forward and flipped the heavy cover open. He stared down at the first page and his jaw dropped. It was a formal bank foreclosure notice, dated exactly 3 years ago. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the desk. 3 years ago, Marcus decided he was a financial genius. I explained, keeping my eyes locked onto my mother. He decided he was going to get rich quick by investing heavily in a series of incredibly shady cryptocurrency schemes. But he did not have the capital. So he went to you, Mom. He brought you a stack of paperwork and told you it was just some routine insurance updates. You trusted your golden boy so much that you signed every single page without reading a single word. My mother looked over at Marcus. Her face was completely blank. "Marcus, what is she talking about?" Vivian asked, her voice trembling. "He had you sign the deed to the family estate over as collateral for a massive, high-interest personal loan." I continued, my voice slicing through the room like a scalpel. "He took all that borrowed money and dumped it into crypto. And then, exactly as anyone with half a brain could have predicted, the market crashed. He lost every single dime in a matter of weeks. He completely defaulted on the loan." "No," my mother whispered, shaking her head in violent denial. No, the bank never sent me any notices. No one ever came to take the house. Because he intercepted the mail, I said bluntly, pointing at my brother who was currently sweating profusely and gripping the edge of the desk to keep from collapsing. He hid the warnings. He hid the final default notices. The bank legally foreclosed on your perfect family estate 36 months ago, Vivian. You lost everything because of him. You were exactly 48 hours away from the county sheriff showing up at your front door to throw all of your furniture out onto the front lawn. Vivian turned to Marcus. Her eyes were completely wide and pleading. Marcus, tell me she is lying. She begged, grabbing his arm. Tell me you did not gamble away my home. Marcus could not even look at her. He stared down at the floor, his breathing ragged and shallow. I am sorry, Mom, he choked out, barely a whisper. I thought I could double the money and pay it back before you ever found out. My mother let out a sound that I had never heard before. It was a hollow, devastated gasp that seemed to scrape the bottom of her soul. She let go of his arm and stumbled backward, practically falling into one of the leather guest chairs. If the bank took the house 3 years ago, how are we still living there? She asked, staring blankly at the wall. I opened the binder and flipped to the very last page. I turned it around and slid it across the desk toward her. It was a certified property deed. Because I bought it, I said simply. My mother slowly looked down at the document. There, printed clearly in bold black ink, was the name of my private corporate trust, Aura Real Estate Holdings. When the bank finalized the foreclosure, they put the property up for a quiet corporate auction, I explained. My financial team monitors distressed assets in the area. They flagged the address and brought it to me. I knew that if you were thrown out on the street, Marcus would just abandon you to save himself. So my trust purchased the house from the bank, paying off the entirety of his defaulted loan in cash. I took over the property taxes. I paid the maintenance fees. For the past 3 years, Vivian, you have been living completely rent-free in a house that I own. I am your legal landlord. The silence that followed was absolute and heavy. The power dynamic in the room had not just shifted, it had been completely obliterated. My mother had walked into my office threatening to use her wealth to destroy me. Now she realized she had absolutely no wealth. She had no house. She had no high society status. Every single thing she thought she owned was a complete illusion, destroyed by the son she worshipped and salvaged quietly by the daughter she despised. You own the house, she whispered, her voice completely devoid of any life or energy. I own the house, I confirmed, nodding slowly. I own the ground you walk on. I own the roof over your head. I own the walls where you host your Sunday dinners and ban me from attending. You came in here threatening to sue me into bankruptcy. But the reality, Vivian, is that I could have you legally evicted by the end of the week. Marcus suddenly dropped to his knees right in front of my desk. The arrogant golden child was finally completely broken. He clasped his hands together, looking up at me with tears streaming down his face. Maya, please, he sobbed loudly. Please, do not do this. I lost Madison. I lost my job. I am completely bankrupt. If you take the house away, we have absolutely nothing left. We will be out on the street. Please, sister, have mercy on us. I looked down at him, feeling completely detached. The word sister sounded like absolute poison coming out of his mouth. He only remembered we were family when he was backed into a corner with absolutely no way out. He had shown me absolutely zero mercy my entire life. And now he was begging for it. I stood up from my chair, looking down at the two people who had made my life a miserable hell for over 2 decades. The final piece of the puzzle was perfectly in place. It was finally time for me to end this completely pathetic family charade permanently, once and for all today. I pressed the intercom. Security, I need guards to escort 2 trespassers out. My mother and Marcus did not resist. The shock of realizing they lived in a house I owned paralyzed them. When the guards entered, they walked out like zombies. I followed. I wanted to see the doors lock behind them forever. We rode the elevator down in suffocating silence. Marcus kept his eyes glued to the floor. His hands trembled. My mother leaned against the handrail, looking pale and defeated. The doors opened, revealing the lobby. It was late afternoon and the space was populated with enough employees to form an audience. I walked them toward the exit. I signaled my assistant to bring my coffee. She handed me a white ceramic cup. I took a deliberate sip, savoring the bitter taste. I was about to tell the guards to push them out when a commotion erupted at the main entrance. The glass doors were shoved open forcefully. Madison Avery stormed into the busy lobby. She looked completely unhinged. Her white dress was wrinkled and stained with sweat. Her blonde hair was a tangled knot. She had just been released on bail and came straight here looking for blood. She spotted Marcus immediately. "You lying, pathetic piece of trash," Madison screamed. Her voice echoed violently, causing nearby employees to jump in surprise. Marcus whipped his head around. His eyes widened in terror as his fiancée charged toward him. Madison did not hesitate. She marched right up to him and violently shoved him backward. He stumbled awkwardly, tripping over his own expensive shoes. "You told me you were rich," she shrieked, pointing a shaking finger directly in his face. "I just spent 3 horrific hours sitting in a cold holding cell. I used my one phone call to contact your mother for bail money. And do you know what Vivian told me while crying? She told me you are completely broke. She told me you lost her house. You made me steal money to buy a ring I thought you could afford. You set me up to take the fall for your massive failures," Marcus snapped. The humiliation of losing the family house, combined with the physical attack from the woman he was trying to impress, was simply too much for his crumbling ego. He pushed her hands away aggressively. "Do not you dare put this on me, you fake society gold digger!" Marcus roared back, his face turning a furious crimson. "You stole that corporate money because you desperately wanted the lavish lifestyle. You wanted the giant diamond ring to show off to your pathetic friends. Do not act like you are an innocent victim here. You are a broke fraud, Madison. I know absolutely everything now. Maya had your background investigated. Your family lost all their money 10 years ago. Your childhood house is being foreclosed on. You are poorer than I am." My mother let out a gasp, pressing her hands against her cheeks. She looked at Madison with horror. "You are actually broke," Vivian asked, her voice trembling. "You told me your father was a prominent hedge fund manager. You told me you belonged to the exclusive country club." Madison let out a harsh laugh that sounded entirely unhinged. "Your golden son is a broke loser, Vivian," she snapped, turning her vicious anger onto my mother. "I lied because I thought I was marrying into a wealthy, successful black family. I thought Marcus was a top corporate executive making $1 million a year. But he is an absolute nothing. He maxed out his credit cards just to buy me cheap dinners. He does not even own the house you currently live in. You are all a bunch of frauds pretending to be rich." I took a sip of my coffee. I was actively watching the perfect engagement violently implode in real time. They were aggressively tearing each other apart right in front of me, exposing every single ugly lie they had built their relationship upon. It was a spectacular collision of massive egos and zero bank accounts. I did not need to say a single word. They were doing all the heavy lifting for me. "You ruined my life," Marcus yelled, stepping aggressively into Madison's personal space. "Because of you, I got fired from my job. Because of you, I am the laughingstock of this entire city. I was the golden child. I was supposed to be the successful one, building generational wealth. You ruined your own life," Madison screamed right back at him, her face red with rage. "You are weak, Marcus. You are a weak, pathetic man who needs his mommy to fight his battles. I am going to federal prison because of you. I am going to lose everything." She suddenly raised her right hand and delivered a hard, stinging slap directly across his face. The sharp crack echoed loudly through the silent lobby. Marcus staggered backward, clutching his cheek in complete shock. He looked like he was about to hit her back, but the 2 security guards stepped between them, pushing them firmly apart. "Stop this right now!" Vivian cried out, grabbing Marcus by the arm and pulling him back. "This is a massive public embarrassment. Look around you right now. Everyone is staring at us." It was true. The remaining employees in the lobby had stopped whatever they were doing to watch the explosive confrontation. It was the ultimate reality show playing out live in the center of Aura Holdings. The facade of the perfect wealthy son and the elite high society bride was dead and buried. They were just two desperate broke criminals screaming at each other in a building they did not own. I lowered my coffee cup and stepped forward, taking control of the space. The sheer entertainment value of their mutual destruction was starting to wear off, and I had a massive company to run. The grand finale of their toxic circus was officially over. The grand finale of their toxic circus was officially over. I turned to the two security guards who were still holding Marcus and my mother apart. "Bring them back up to my office," I commanded, my voice echoing with absolute authority. "We have one final piece of administrative business to conclude before they are permanently banned from this property." Marcus and Vivian were completely drained of their venom. The explosive confrontation with Madison had stripped away their last remaining layers of false dignity. They did not argue or resist as the guards guided them back toward the private elevator. The ride up to the 60th floor was suffocatingly quiet. The only sound was the faint mechanical hum of the elevator shaft and the heavy, ragged breathing coming from my brother. He leaned against the mirrored wall, looking like a hollow shell of a man. My mother stood rigidly in the corner, staring blankly at the floor. The glittering city skyline outside the glass elevator walls seemed to mock their absolute ruin. We stepped back into my private executive suite. The shattered crystal paperweight was still lying on the hardwood floor, exactly where Marcus had violently knocked it over just an hour ago. It was a perfect physical representation of his entire life right now. I walked around to the back of my obsidian desk and sat down in my leather chair. I did not offer them a seat. They stood awkwardly in the center of the room, flanked by the two large security guards. I opened my middle desk drawer and pulled out a crisp manila folder. I opened it and extracted a single sheet of heavy white legal paper. It was not a thick binder or a complicated financial spreadsheet. It was a very simple, direct legal document. I placed my hand flat on top of the paper and slid it slowly across the polished black surface of the desk until it stopped right at the edge. "That is a legally binding 30-day eviction notice," I announced, keeping my tone completely clinical and detached. "As the sole legal owner of the property you currently reside in, I am officially terminating your tenancy. You have exactly 30 days from this current moment to pack your belongings and vacate the premises. If you are not completely moved out by the 1st of next month, local law enforcement will arrive to forcibly remove you, and all remaining items will be thrown into a dumpster." My mother let out a small, wounded gasp. She stepped forward on shaking legs and picked up the piece of paper. Her eyes darted rapidly across the bold black text. The official county seal was stamped at the bottom, making the reality completely undeniable. The last tiny spark of hope completely vanished from her eyes. The illusion she had clung to her entire life was officially dead and buried. She looked up at me, and her face crumpled in pure, absolute despair. She finally realized the massive, catastrophic mistake she had made. For over 30 years, she had poured all of her love, all of her resources, and all of her blind faith into a son who was fundamentally empty. She had treated the golden child like a god, and he had rewarded her by gambling away her home and leaving her entirely destitute. Meanwhile, she had treated her daughter like a worthless scapegoat, actively punishing me for choosing my own path. And now that very same daughter was a billionaire chief executive officer who held her entire survival in the palm of her hand. She had aggressively backed the wrong child, and now she had completely lost her only safety net. "Maya, please," Vivian sobbed, dropping the paper back onto the desk. Her knees finally gave out, and she collapsed into the leather guest chair, weeping with heavy, broken heaves. "You cannot do this to your own mother. I have nowhere else to go. I am too old to start over. I am sorry, Maya. I am so incredibly sorry for everything I said to you. I was wrong. I was so wrong about Marcus, and I was so wrong about you. Please forgive me. Do not throw me out on the street. I will do whatever you want." I looked at her tears and felt absolutely nothing. Her apology was entirely worthless because it was not born out of genuine remorse. It was born out of raw, terrified desperation. She was only sorry because she had finally run out of money and options. Marcus, seeing our mother completely break down, dropped to his knees right next to her chair. He clasped his hands tightly together, looking up at me with red, swollen eyes. "Sister, please," he begged, his voice cracking pathetically. "I will get a job. I will work 3 jobs. I will pay you back every single dime I lost on the house. I will pay back the 50,000 I owe on the credit cards. Just give me a chance to fix this. Give us a second chance, Maya. We are blood. We are family. You cannot just erase us like a bad business deal." I stood up from my chair, standing tall and completely unbothered by their desperate tears. I looked down at the pathetic, broken man kneeling on my floor and the weeping woman sitting next to him. They had spent my entire life trying to make me feel small and unwanted. They had tried to destroy my career and ruin my name just hours ago. "You banned me from the table," I said, my voice dropping into a cold, deadly whisper that filled the entire room. "You told me I was not good enough to sit with your family. You told me I was a disgrace and a peddler." I paused, letting the heavy silence amplify my final words. "So I bought the entire restaurant," I concluded, staring directly into his terrified eyes. "You do not get a second chance. You do not get my money. And you certainly do not get my forgiveness. Get out of my building." I nodded to the security guards. They stepped forward immediately, grabbing Marcus by his arms and hauling him up from the floor. They pulled my mother out of the chair. Marcus was crying loudly now, a humiliating wail of total defeat. My mother could not even support her own weight, leaning heavily against the guard as they dragged her toward the heavy oak doors. I stood firmly behind my desk and watched them disappear into the hallway. The heavy doors clicked shut, sealing them out of my life forever. The eviction was complete, and I was finally entirely free. Exactly 1 year later, the atmosphere inside the grand ballroom of the Obsidian Tower was absolutely electric. I stood on the sweeping glass balcony, looking down at the magnificent sea of elegance below me. Tonight was the inaugural fundraising gala for the Aura Foundation, a charitable initiative I had launched to provide full-ride scholarships and venture capital grants to underprivileged Black youth looking to break into the business world. The room was packed with the most influential leaders, investors, and philanthropists in the city. The air hummed with the sounds of a live jazz quartet and the bright clinking of crystal champagne flutes. I was wearing a stunning floor-length emerald gown that caught the light with every step I took. I felt completely radiant, entirely untethered from the heavy, suffocating chains of my past. The past 12 months had been the most transformative and peaceful period of my entire life. Following the eviction, my mother and Marcus had practically vanished from my daily orbit. They were forced to move into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the far outskirts of the city. Without his fake corporate facade and the hidden financial backing of my corporate trust, Marcus had to finally face the harsh reality of his own massive incompetence. Madison had taken a plea deal for the corporate fraud, avoiding severe federal prison time, but completely destroying her professional reputation and her family's remaining social standing forever. Their highly anticipated elite country club wedding had been permanently canceled. The toxic illusion they had all worked so desperately to maintain had completely dissolved, leaving behind nothing but the bitter truth of their own self-inflicted failures. I stepped away from the balcony edge and walked back into the vibrant energy of the main ballroom. I was immediately greeted by David, my chief operating officer, who handed me a fresh glass of sparkling water. He smiled warmly, pointing out a group of young, brilliant entrepreneurs who had just received our first round of corporate seed funding. Seeing their young faces light up with genuine hope and unbridled ambition filled me with an indescribable sense of profound purpose. This was what true generational wealth actually looked like. It was not about hoarding money or maxing out credit cards to impress people who secretly despised you. It was about building a solid, undeniable foundation and pulling the next incredibly talented generation up the corporate ladder right alongside you. As I chatted with a promising young software developer, my sleek silver clutch began to vibrate gently. I politely excused myself, stepping into a quiet alcove near the massive floral centerpieces. I unclasped the small bag and pulled out my personal cell phone. The bright screen illuminated the dim alcove, displaying a new text message from an unsaved number. But I did not need to see a saved contact name to know exactly who was desperately reaching out to me. I opened the message and read the pathetic words glowing on the screen. Maya, please text me back. The message read. I know you hate me, and I know I ruined absolutely everything. I am so incredibly sorry for what I did to you. Mom is really sick, and we are completely out of money. I cannot find a job anywhere in the corporate sector because my background checks keep getting flagged. I heard your company is hiring new overnight security guards for the downtown properties. Please, Maya, just give me a chance to work as a guard in your building. I will work the worst shifts. I will stay completely out of your way. I just need to pay rent. Please, sister. I stood in the quiet shadow of the alcove reading the digital plea for help. A year ago, a message like this might have triggered a massive wave of toxic guilt. I would have felt the crushing weight of cultural expectation pressing down on my shoulders, demanding that I rescue my older brother from the consequences of his own terrible actions. I would have heard the echoes of the church congregation telling me to forgive and forget, to turn the other cheek and blindly support my own flesh and blood. But standing there in my emerald gown, surrounded by the absolute pinnacle of my own hard-earned success, I felt absolutely nothing but cold closure. Marcus was not apologizing because he had experienced a sudden moral awakening. He was apologizing because he was completely broke and entirely out of options. He wanted to work as a security guard in the very same building where he had publicly laughed in my face and loudly called me a pathetic peddler. He wanted me to save him from the exact same poverty he had actively weaponized against our own mother. I did not type a response. I did not owe him an explanation. I tapped the icon in the corner of the application and selected the option to permanently block the contact. A red confirmation window popped up. I pressed confirm without a millisecond of hesitation. The number vanished from my device, deleted forever into the digital void. The toxic cord connecting me to their endless cycle of misery was completely severed for good. I slipped the phone back into my silver clutch and took a deep cleansing breath. The realization washed over me like a warm, brilliant sunrise. Genetics and blood do not make a family. Sharing a last name does not automatically entitle someone to your peace, your resources, or your unwavering loyalty. True family is built entirely on mutual respect and genuine love. I walked out of the quiet alcove and rejoined the sparkling gala. David smiled warmly, handing me a fresh glass of chilled champagne. I raised my glass high, silently toasting my truly loyal friends, my incredible team, and the beautiful self-made empire I now proudly called my own true home. I took a very long, satisfying sip of the cold, crisp, expensive vintage champagne. Fade to black. The story of Maya offers a profound and necessary lesson about the true definition of family and the critical importance of setting boundaries. Society often conditions us to believe that blood relations are sacred and that we must endure mistreatment simply because we share a last name. We are frequently told that family is everything, and that cutting ties with relatives is an unforgivable betrayal. However, this narrative can be deeply toxic. Maya's journey beautifully shatters this harmful illusion. It teaches us that when people use your shared history as a weapon to manipulate, exploit, or humiliate you, they completely forfeit the privilege of being in your life. Her mother and brother demanded blind loyalty, while offering absolutely none in return. They expected her to shrink herself to protect their fragile egos and violently fund their entirely fake lifestyles. But Maya realized that true family is built on a strong foundation of mutual respect, honesty, and unconditional support, not biological obligation. Her ultimate victory was not just about financial success or exposing the massive fraud of those who deeply wronged her. It was about the liberating realization that walking away from toxic relatives is never an act of cruelty, but a vital act of self-preservation. We all have the power and the fundamental right to construct our own families, choosing people who genuinely celebrate our growth rather than those who actively try to tear us down. Protecting your peace is your highest personal responsibility. If you are currently holding on to a toxic relationship out of a heavy sense of obligation, it is time to prioritize your own mental well-being. Take a moment today to boldly step away from anyone who does not respect you and instead choose to fully embrace a life of authentic freedom and profound joy